This week, the country will commemorate the 44th anniversary of the death of Black Consciousness Movement leader Bantu Stephen Biko. Now, a lecture to be delivered by Dr Matshidiso Moeti, the first female regional director in the World Health Organization, will be held over the weekend. Biko died in a police detention after suffering multiple injuries and a brain hemorrhage on the 12th of September 44 years ago. So to help us reflect on his legacy, we are now joined by anti-apartheid activist and now South African Council of Churches General Secretary, Bishop Malusi Mpumlwana. Bishop, good morning. Good to speak to you once more. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, Bishop, this, of course, an extraordinary man, a leader that many would say we were deprived of in a democratic dispensation, but obviously also someone that you knew well, that you knew personally. Let's talk about the man who Stephen Bantu Biko was and what he espoused.
An amazing man, very much a people's person, gregarious and full of life. And it's actually almost a contradiction to say, as I would, that he was not surprised by his killing. Because he had no fear, he dared, you couldn't intimidate him. Steve believed in the worth of the human person in Black people. And as Desmond Tutu would say in the preface that he put up for the 1996 edition of I Write What I Like, he said that what Steve did and Black consciousness did was to restore the identification of the Black person as created in the image of God. And I've actually identified with that because I myself studied theology to understand what it meant to be created in the image of God if I was Black in apartheid South Africa. And so from a religious point of view, he made Black people feel at home in God. But politically speaking, he was saying it does not matter whether you are PAC or ANC, if you have no self-worth and self-esteem, don't recognize the value of your humanity, you are useless for any organization. You cannot do anything really because you ascribe value to what is white and white people and denigrate what is Black, which also led to Black people treating other Black people with absolute disdain while they were groveling to white South Africans. And the second thing about this is that for Biko, Black was not what we now call Black in South Africa. It was actually colors, Indians, and Africans all together as Black people. And this is very important because had we kept that mindset, we would not be having a phenomenon where people are fighting on race. We would not be having the divisions that you see in the Western Cape between colors and Africans. You would be expecting to see a Black solidarity, which in Biko's terms also led to economic solidarity amongst Black people to lift themselves together up the ladder so that they can improve their quality of life collectively.
And I'm glad
the other point would have been that Black consciousness was itself, while it was an attitude of mind, to lift us out of our misery, so to say, self-esteem issues. But it was also a way of saying it must translate, because we're a Black majority society, it must translate to national consciousness so that you actually have a true non-racialism where the same phenomena that we had for Black people of solidarity, of value for each other, we can then translate that to whites doing the same for Black people and Black people doing that for whites in a national consciousness.
And of course, we're still struggling with these things in contemporary South Africa. We're still struggling with understanding what non-racialism actually means. We're still grappling with Black consciousness in contemporary South African society. So today, if we look at these phenomena today, how do we use them to advance our cause, as it were, so that we can actually start moving forward as a nation?
Well, one of the things that impeded the serious engagement of Black consciousness was actually a political ethnicism. We refer to this in my wife Togo and I wrote an introduction to the 1996 edition of I Write What I Like at the invitation of Father Elder Stamps. One of the things that we identified at the time was the problem of political ethnicism that had been developed through the Bantustans. And, we never thought about this, but when we created the provinces, we did not, we simply just transferred political ethnicism into a democratic South Africa. And I wonder what the wisdom was of keeping the provinces. It's really better, it seems to me, that we actually have our investment in the municipalities, because the municipalities would then be a geographic space rather than an ethnic space. The provinces tend to be ethnic in the same way that the Bantustans were ethnic, and therefore you can't remove the history of ethnic division and the politicization of ethnicism. And I think that probably will come back to bite us in due course. But today, we need to revisit these concepts of do we really believe in the worth of the Black person? Why is it that we've got so much almost violent distaste for each other in a way that leads to so much? I mean, it's the same thing applies to the relationship between men and women. You can transfer that to the same thing. It's self-hate, because this man is born of woman, and the way he treats woman, you would say that it's almost like to spite her. That in the same way that you treat another Black person, to spite her or him. And that seems to me that Biko's message of solidarity needs to be brought back, both for the purposes of developing our human relationships with one another. The two things about relationships that Biko emphasized. One was that Black consciousness would make you take yourself seriously, your self-worth, and be comfortable in your skin. But secondly, it then informs how you relate to another Black person in a relational way. But thirdly, it will then enable you to relate to white people without fear or poor self-esteem. Now, that, I would say, applies not only to relationships of Black and white, but also to relationships between men and women in our society.
So 44 years, Bishop, since the death in detention of Stephen Bantu Biko, and we have this commemoration coming up on the weekend. But how important are these commemorations? Do we actually make the most of them? Do they actually, apart from a speech that is given and a fleeting moment in which we remember the legacy of a hero such as Biko, apart from that, do these commemorative events actually have any sort of real impact on people and society?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that not enough of them is made. Yes, in the sense that my observation of what the Steve Biko Foundation does under Nkosinathi is to take what comes out of these themes and create programs for them at the Steve Biko Foundation, Steve Biko Center in King Williamstown. And they have a program with young people that I think is an investment that comes out of what is harvested from these, and then, you get young people to actually build on the values that emerge from this. So I think that to that extent, it could be more, and I would think that it would have been helpful if more of that would come. For example, the address that's going to come this weekend, I would hope that it would reverberate beyond the corridors of Auckland Park as it would come through SABC, but that it would actually have an ongoing engagement and debate, as well as application in the various sectors of our society. And I think that's what the Steve Biko Foundation tries to do in a small way.
And just finally, Bishop, I think for many people it's almost as a badge of honor, some tick box exercise that you have to tick off that you've read somewhere, sometime in your life, I write what I like. But beyond that, in actually taking in those teachings and living them so that we can move towards a better society and better self-esteem amongst ourselves as black people. You know, what can young people do? What would you suggest for young people to basically conscientize themselves in terms of the black consciousness philosophy?
The term conscientization actually is a term that we developed its understanding pretty much from the writings of Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator. When you talk about conscientization, and Biko ensured that we had this training that we used for literacy training. It simply means, and that's as far as Freire is concerned, that there are three levels of consciousness, of a human consciousness. One is primitive consciousness, where you just know there's a yesterday, there's a tomorrow, there's life beyond the horizon, but you don't care till less you are satisfied in your little valley. The second one, which is like a child, where it just follows the parent, it doesn't care about what's going on elsewhere. The second consciousness is what he calls mass consciousness. I call it bright lights consciousness. Jim comes to Joburg. You want to fit in and be seen to be one of the crowd. And of course, advertisers and politicians love this because slogans and all these are very good for bringing people together and identify. But the third one, this is where Freire was going, and that's what consciousness is about. In Biko's terms, is what is critical consciousness, where you ask a why until there's no more why to ask. Everything has got to be rationally explained, and therefore you then put your life in a situation where you don't do things that are mindless, that you cannot explain. You always ask yourself, why am I burning this supermarket when I'll have no place to buy tomorrow? And of course, because of that, the struggle in the early days did not destroy, but it sought to build. And I think that it is that conscientization that is necessary to say, actually, you ought to ask 3 questions or so before you act, so that you never act on something you cannot justify.
Well, I'm actually looking forward to further engagement in this regard, because it is so important, especially given the contemporary issues that we are grappling with as a society. But Bishop Mpumlwana, thanks so much for your time this morning. And that, of course, was Bishop Mpumlwana talking to us about the commemoration of the 44th anniversary of the death of Bantu Stephen Biko in police detention, and, of course, the memorial lecture that will be held later this week. SABC will keep you posted with more details on that. Time now.